Hi everybody, it's Chris Kandai here. Welcome to FAQ. We continue our series today in Daniel, which is thinking about life in lockdown, being inspired by someone who's holding on to God under really difficult circumstances. Yesterday, we thought about who are you in lockdown? How's your changing circumstances impact who you are? How can you hold on like Daniel did to who he is and whose he is? Well, today we're thinking about who will you serve in lockdown, drawing on Daniel chapter 2. And what we're going to see is like a courtroom drama. I don't know about you, I like a good murder mystery. Been watching Defending Jacob. I used to be a fan of Suits. I kind of gave up on it towards the end. But a good courtroom drama is pretty exciting. Well, that's kind of what you get with the tale of Daniel. He's now in employment as a civil servant working for Nebuchadnezzar. Now, I don't know if you saw the tweet that went out over the weekend from a rogue civil servant challenging how hard it is to kind of work and serve under seemingly difficult political context, like we're seeing with Dominic Cummings and all the fiasco around there. I'm not going to make an opinion about that on here, but being a civil servant has always been difficult, and Daniel's called to be one for a pretty despotic king. Have a look at these circumstances he's having to live in. Daniel chapter 2 verse 1. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me and I want to know what it means. Then the astrologers answered the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream and we will interpret it. The king replied to the astrologers, this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honour. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. Once more they replied, let the king tell his servants the dream and we will interpret it. Then the king answered, I am certain that you're trying to gain time because you realise that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is just one penalty for you. You've conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream and I will know that you can interpret it for me. Wow. Okay, I don't know about you. Lots of people I know have been really struggling to sleep. Nebuchadnezzar is in that situation. He cannot sleep. His brain is working overtime and he's had this kind of recurring dream and he doesn't know what to do with it. So, of course, he calls in all his people and asks them to interpret it for him. That's so far so normal. Dream interpretation is a kind of big thing, but Nebuchadnezzar is a pretty wily guy. I guess he knows that it's pretty easy for people to kind of come up with some flattering or encouraging dream interpretation, and he's probably got a whole bunch of yes men who are absolutely scared to death of him. You see what happens if you disobey Nebuchadnezzar. You will be cut to pieces and your house will be turned into a pile of rubble. That's the kind of political leadership Daniel was having to act as a civil servant under. In one sense, I'm really impressed by Nebuchadnezzar. He knows when people are trying to pull a fast one on him. A lot of the whole New Age, mysticism, astrology stuff for me looks like complete bunk because it's people putting kind of woolly interpretations on things. I have no time for astrology. It makes no sense to me at all. And to be honest, sometimes, not always, my son is an art student, some people, the way they interpret art, it just sounds like baloney, like they're just making stuff up. They're just stringing words together, re-narrating things. And Nebuchadnezzar's got no time for that at all. So he says, look, if you know how to interpret a dream, well, you must be in touch with some kind of divine spirit or something. Surely it's as easy for him to tell you the dream. He is brilliantly skeptical. But Nebuchadnezzar has made a problem for all those that work for him, all his civil servants. And so that means Daniel is in trouble. Look what happens next. Verse 10. The astrologers answered the king, there is not a man on earth who can do what the king asked. There, never a truer word spoken. There's not a man on earth that could do this. Well, that was the point. As astrologers and mystics, you were supposed to be in touch with something more than the earth. You were more than just a man. You were supposed to be in touch with the divine. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live amongst men. There it is. When the rubber hits the road, the truth of the kind of spirituality and the theology of these guys is exposed. They recognize they had no contact with God. They couldn't do the miraculous because they had no contact with God. It was all a sham. It was all just made up. And this is where things get fun. Verse 12. This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. He sees through their junk. You know, you said that you had connection to the God, but when the rubber hits the road, you got nothing. You're all in for it now. I'm having a massive clear out. You're all fired and dead. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. Why? Because they were part of the same establishment. That is a challenge sometimes, isn't it? If you, as a believer, join in with a kind of wider network, maybe you join a political party, it sometimes is you're tarred with the same brush as anyone in them. And so when the death penalty comes to the civil servants, Nebuchadnezzar is going to have to execute Daniel too. And we know that he likes Daniel, but it can't just show partiality. Verse 14. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. Oh, just love him, don't you? He's under pressure. We've seen what Daniel does under pressure, even as a young man, when he's just been wrenched from his family, put into a new context. He still has somehow wisdom and tact. And now he's showing that again under pressure. Some people talk about needing a non-anxious presence when you're in an emergency. Well, Daniel really is that. In the midst of a death penalty, Daniel still has the wherewithal to speak with kindness, wisdom, tact to those that have power over him. I wonder whether in the middle of this crisis, we Christians, we that believe in Jesus, will offer that same kind of non-anxious presence. We will offer wisdom and tact to those that are leading, even if we don't agree with some of the decisions that they've come up against. That's really hard. And you know, in one sense, I'm quite excited that many people have been challenging the hypocrisy and seemingly illegality or unwise decisions that some of our civil servants have been making. But we want to offer that with wisdom and tact, just like Daniel did. He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. So he's pausing the death penalty. I mean, it's quite a brave thing to do. I guess he had nothing to lose. He was going to be killed anyway. Pausing the death penalty, asking for time to interpret the dream. We will see that Daniel's actions don't just help him, they will help the whole of the civil service. So it was an incredibly brave and courageous thing to do. Verse 17. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These are four friends who have come into exile together, but they've stayed in touch even after they've got jobs at university. If you like, after university, this is the graduate scheme, if you like, for the civil service. But these four friends have stayed in touch. I think that's beautiful. If Daniel chapter 1 was what it was like to be a university student in the University of Babylon studying Babylonian magic and art, they had a little kind of Christian group, maybe like a Christian union. They kind of helped each other to stay faithful to God and to challenge the system. But now that they've graduated, they've stayed in touch, even in their new role. And it's to them that Daniel calls. So maybe you need to know that in lockdown, we still need mates, don't we? We still need people around us that can speak truth and encourage us and help us. And if we can't kind of live the Christian life, we can't fight against injustice and evil and despotic rulers, we can't do that on our own. We need that kind of band of brothers and sisters around us. And Daniel calls on his three close friends to help him. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, praise to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. Verse 21, he changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and deposes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, O God, O God of my fathers, you have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what was asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. Included in this story is a big chunk of time Daniel wants to praise God. Do you hear him? He's not saying, oh, I'm so wise, I'm such a prayer warrior, look at me, look at me. He just wants to honour God. And so he bursts out into spontaneous praise, maybe a little song, maybe he started singing right there on the spot, offering praise to God because he's so grateful. I tell you what, that was a high stress moment, and yet he can't stop himself praising God. I don't know about you, I might have just wanted to run into the king and tell him everything, but Daniel stops to acknowledge where his wisdom has come from. Verse 24, then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Now, Daniel could have made a power play there, couldn't he? I'm going to be the only wise man left because Nebuchadnezzar is going to wipe out all these other people. Well, then I arise to power because I've got this gift. Man, Daniel uses this gift from God to show mercy and compassion to other people. And they weren't in the same page as him. They weren't Jewish. They didn't believe in the God of Israel. They had other gods that they were following. But Daniel still speaks up for them and stops them getting executed. It's beautiful. Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means. The king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, I remember we had that whole identity thing we looked at yesterday, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? Now listen to this. Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these. Oh, do you love it? You love his humility. Daniel does not belong to the king. He does not belong to his ambition or his ego. He belongs to God. And therefore, even as he has this moment to shine, he acknowledges God. He gives a bit of an evangelistic and an apologetic explanation of how he knows what he knows. There is no other God that could do this. There's no other magician or sorcerer that could do this. But there is a God in heaven, the true and living God, the God that you need to know, Nebuchadnezzar. He gave me this wisdom. I am his. I belong to him. I am a servant of the God of Israel. I am Yahweh's man. And he speaks truth to the king. We haven't got time to read it all. It's a pretty scary vision about a statue with feet of clay. And God's telling Nebuchadnezzar that his kingdom and all his might and power is going to be smashed apart by the coming of God's kingdom, and he needs to be ready for it. Man, that was a tough message for Daniel to tell the king, but it's so irrefutably from God because there's no other way that no other way that Daniel could have known the dream. And so Daniel explains that dream to him. Listen to the response. Oh, this is what Daniel says. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true and the interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and passed him honour and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. Whoa, don't you love this? Daniel has the courage to speak truth to the king, even though it's saying that one day King Nebuchadnezzar, your reign is going to come to an end. There is a God in heaven who's ultimately in control, and the only reason you're still here and serving and living is because of God's mercy and grace. And that breaks Nebuchadnezzar's heart, and he's on the floor and he's asking for mercy and he's showing honour to Daniel's God. And Daniel, again, is just so honouring of those that he loves, those three buddies that he had from university and now in this first civil servant role. He makes sure they get appointed as well. Because why? Because this is all about the community of God. How can we stick together? How can we support each other? How can we be a blessing to this nation, even though we're captives here? Let's try and do some good. They're conspiring inspiring together. All through history, there have been these little bands of believers that have tried to do that. Think about the Holy Club that John and Charles Wesley started. Christian brothers and sisters who gathered together thinking, how can we serve God at university? Or think about William Wilberforce. He had his Clapham sect. That's a group of people that gathered together regularly to think, how can we bring the gospel and the mercy of God into public life? How can we affect slavery? How can we affect workers' rights? What can we do to bless this nation? And inspiration maybe in Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. They're going to stick together that they might serve. Friends, in lockdown, under the pressure cooker that is our lives, I have so much that I want to learn from Daniel. I need mates. I need to stay faithful to God. I need to keep serving him as he gives us opportunities. We need to give all glory to him. We need to be reaching out to God in prayer, even when we find prayer difficult. I've got a lot to say about that. That's a book coming out. Watch out for it. But hey, I wonder if this story of Daniel and his bravery and his great God can inspire you to stay faithful to God. Who are you in lockdown? Who will you serve? I want to be like Daniel and serve the God in heaven who does have something to do with men and women on earth, who does have a plan, who does have mercy. And even in these difficult times, let's keep showing that mercy to those that need it the most. Thanks so much for listening. Tomorrow we'll be looking at Daniel chapter 3. Join me then.